Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vaga Muradian here at the Dubai International Air Chiefs Conference. Our coverage here, as well as at the Dubai Air Show over the coming days, is sponsored by FLIR Systems. And we've got with us Danny Sebright, who is the Executive Director of the US-UAE Business Council. Danny, thanks very much for spending some time with us on a very, very busy day.
Happy to be here. How can I help?
Well, I wanted to start off. I mean, this organization is something that was created to foster the business-to-business relationship between the United States and the U.A.E., close ally of the United States. But it's come to mean so much more, especially as the United Arab Emirates, over the past decade, or more now, has been pushing to build its aerospace industry, to build its defense industries, to use those partnerships with firms all around the world in order to sort of build an organic capability. Talk to us a little bit about how important shows like this are, conferences like this and shows like this, to build those kind of links. And what does it mean in a real world basis for the American side of your membership, given it means a lot of technology transfer and in certain cases means losing business, production business that would be happening in the United States?
So first, let's start with the Council and why it's so important that we're here today and that everyone, all of our members are here today. The Council, as you know, was created to foster these relationships as the U.A.E. diversifies its economy away from oil and gas. And it's not just the aerospace sector, it's across a whole host of verticals that are very, very important for the U.A.E. for the future, to move from an economy that was used to be 80 or 90% reliant on gas and oil for its revenue to now already 70% being other, and oil and gas being 30%. So aerospace is a big driver in that. The Emirates airline, Etihad Airlines, that's key. The defense sector, also key. Very, very, very important. The jobs that the U.S. industries get here from at home from these sales are critical in every one of the districts around the United States, where Lockheed and Boeing and Raytheon, FLIR Systems, your sponsor, where they have jobs. The sales out here support those jobs immediately. As part of that, you know very well that American companies have to also help build up some of the education and the job opportunities in some of these foreign countries where they make major sales. I think it's about creating the nascent capability on the ground, still having the mainstay of the business at home, and building these supply lines across a global supply chain for the future. The U.A.E. is critical, not only because of the sales, but because of its place as a nexus and a hub between East and West and North and South. All of our members are here today. The Council, as you know, was created to foster these relationships as the U.A.E. diversifies its economy away from oil and gas. And it's not just the aerospace sector, it's across a whole host of verticals that are very, very important for the U.A.E. for the future, to move from an economy that was used to be 80 or 90% reliant on gas and oil for its revenue to now already 70% being other, and oil and gas being 30%. So aerospace is a big driver in that. The Emirates airline, Etihad Airlines, that's key. The defense sector, also key. Very, very, very important. The jobs that the U.S. industries get here from at home from these sales are critical in every one of the districts around the United States, where Lockheed and Boeing and Raytheon, FLIR Systems, your sponsor, where they have jobs. The sales out here support those jobs immediately. As part of that, you know very well that American companies have to also help build up some of the education and the job opportunities in some of these foreign countries where they make major sales. I think it's about creating the nascent capability on the ground, still having the mainstay of the business at home, and building these supply lines across a global supply chain for the future. The U.A.E. is critical, not only because of the sales, but because of its place as a nexus and a hub between East and West and North and South.
One of the challenges and the concerns regionally has been the reluctance of the United States historically, whether for a missile technology control regime or for other national legislation, particular concern with unmanned systems, for example, being exported to this region. Congress has had an issue with that. I remember even with the United Kingdom, it was a very protracted process for the UK, America's closest ally, was sharing nuclear secrets and all sorts of intelligence capabilities, and that was a challenge, getting those aircraft certified for the UK. Talk to us, this region has decided to sign up for a lot of Chinese programs when it's come to that kind of slowdown from Washington. Talk to us a little bit about what that strategically means, and what is some advice as the new administration, President Trump had a successful visit out here a few months ago, has fostered relationships here in this region. This administration has been less critical of anything that's been happening in the region as well. Talk to us about whether or not you see a change in policy, and what's the message you have for policymakers in Washington to change their tune and what the real world implications here are on the ground.
So I absolutely see a change going on, and I'll start with the fact that there's more and more consensus on the threat. The threat is Iran across the region. And because of that, the U.A.E., Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries are more closely coordinating with Egypt and Jordan and even Israel for the future, to the common threats that they all face, which is Iranian fundamentalism, Iranian drives to reach hegemony in the region. So the U.S. administration now, the Trump administration now, if I had to say it, is leaning more forward in starting to think about how they release technologies in a whole host of areas that might have been off the table in the past because we have a new cooperation in the region on dealing with the threat. The U.A.E. is never going to attack Israel. We all know that. The U.A.E. should be and is and will be next in line for the F-35 as a result. They need it. They need it to be up to par and up to speed in interoperability and coalition operations with us for the future. That is the future. That is the way this is going. I see hit-to-kill UAV capability being released here in the next number of years. There's always going to be a lag time between some countries and what they get and when they get it. One of the problems is that our current policy is reviewed as a coalition of Arab states against Israel with regard to preserving their qualitative military edge. And my one piece of advice to policymakers and political leaders back home is we have to start evaluating some of these Arab countries on their own merits, in their own right, and not blocking them together, if you will, as one coalition in how we review policy.
That's right, because the QME is not taken as an individual nation basis, but what the collective capability are of those nations together. But Congress has been one of the biggest impediments of this. I remember the Bush administration, the Clinton administration before it has worked hard to try to reform the arms export system to have, as John Hamre always used to say, sort of like, don't worry about the stuff that we shouldn't be worried about when he was deputy secretary, but he's a message that he carried on at CSIS as well as the head of CSIS. And yet Congress has still had a very, very restrictive approach. What's the message? How do you change that? You have a lot of Washington experience,
Correct.
even though you're sitting out here or spending half of your time out here or a large portion of your time out here. How do you get that changed? Do you see any traction, any motion on the Hill for minds to be truly changed on this, given the stakes are our allies vote with their feet. They go and they buy from countries that will sell it, even if it's a country like China, which is very bad for us, especially when it comes to unmanned systems and ISR systems.
Well, let's first be clear about what the Emiratis and others are buying from the Chinese. They're not buying advanced fifth-generation capability. They're buying workarounds in some basic capabilities when we won't show them the glide path or the future path for how they get to the things that they really want to get. They're never going to get those things in an advanced capability from China. That's not going to happen, not in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years at least. So back in Washington, we've done one thing that the Business Council does, and working very closely with the U.S. government, administration, and the U.A.E. government, is to try to get out accurate information about where this country is as a partner and an ally and a friend, how this country is tolerant, how this country is transparent, how this country is working to be our partner on the right side of the issues that are all important to us for the future. And that's what we've been doing in Washington for the last 10 years. We've done actually a very good job. We got the 123 agreement for peaceful nuclear energy done in this country in 2008 and 9, for this country in 2008 and 9. That was an amazing accomplishment. Since then, we've worked forward in a whole host of other ways, and let's just say there's a lot of things that are progressing along. The Obama administration may have put the brakes on a few things and slowed it down, but I think there's a new view, a new review going on, if I could say, of some of these major key policy issues, and I think things are going to start moving again for the U.A.E. in particular in the region.
And let me ask you one last question. Saudi Arabia is on trying to mimic to a degree on what the United Arab Emirates started doing decades ago, actually, to try to diversify the economy. Obviously, it's an economy that's highly dependent on oil. Mohammed bin Salman has been working on trying to do that modernization, and the pace of it for some people is the necessary aggressiveness, and for some people it's a terrifying pace of change for a culture that has historically moved very, very slowly, very, very gingerly. And great article in the New York Times. A rapid reformer or autocrat in the making, maybe a little bit of both. Talk to us a little bit about how some of the lessons, or how the Saudis have been studying the UAE model, and how you're interfacing with your sister organization in Saudi Arabia as the Saudis look to becoming a little bit more open, a little more modern, but certainly much, much more accelerated and a much more developed domestic military and aerospace capability.
So folks like to say that something is too big to fail. Out here, the concern is not that the Saudis are too big to fail, but they're too important to fail. And the Saudis, first and foremost, they lead the religion. They lead Islam. They are the light that guides Muslims around the world on the future of the religion. So the Emiratis have decided a long time ago that they had to work very, very closely with the Saudis to help modernize, to help bring not just Saudi Arabia, not the UAE, but the region along to a more tolerant, accepting, modernized sort of place. And that's different in different pockets in different ways. But the Emiratis have made a lot of progress. The new leadership in Saudi Arabia has looked over its shoulder at the UAE, not with jealousy, but more in sort of an Arab brotherhood sort of way. Well, if they can do it, why can't we? How do we do it? And they've talked closely with the Emiratis about lessons learned, about areas where the Emiratis have made great success, areas maybe where the Emiratis tried and the success wasn't so great, so that the Saudis don't make similar mistakes, number one. And number two, there's even been coordination so that we don't have duplicative industries set up in some cases, so that there's overlap and coordination, so that strengths and weaknesses are played to in both places. And that's very, very important when you're investing all this resource and all this effort in trying to jumpstart the Saudi system and bring it forward really quickly.
And last question on Qatar. How do you see that resolving? You watch the region very, very closely. There's a sense, depending on who you talk to, that how does this get resolved? Because, having talked to Qataris, Al Thani family is not going to go anywhere no matter the demands. I mean, everybody focuses on Al Jazeera. The bigger thing, when you talk to Al Thani, says they said that our family is illegitimate and we've got to go and we ain't going anywhere. There's a sense that I've talked to in some, Emiratis, but as well as Saudis, that it would be good to figure out a way to climb down, but then the question is how to climb down from this, and then how to tend to the residual damage from it. As somebody who's been paying attention to this region for a long time, how do you see this going? Because it does complicate life for the United States, it complicates life for everybody, and at one point there was a lot of kumbaya from a GCC standpoint across all three of these countries.
Well, we have to start from the point of view, in my assessment, that some of the security concerns, or a lot of the security concerns that the Emiratis and the Saudis and others have raised about Qatari connections, if you will, to the Muslim Brotherhood and other things are real. The concerns are real, and they have to be dealt with. They have to be answered. What's happened since June, or June 5th, when this first started, obviously, there's been a lot of negative and criticism on both sides. That's created a very, very deep hole. So how do the leaders to this conflict dig out of that hole right now and sit at the table and deal with the legitimate concerns, security concerns that the Saudis and the Emiratis have put on the table, and move forward and move beyond that? I think that's what Secretary Tillerson and the U.S. administration have been trying to work hard at. We're not there yet. I don't think we're going to be there by the end of the year. We have a GCC summit that's supposed to be in December, and that might get postponed because Qatar wouldn't be able to come to it necessarily. But maybe the new year will bring us some new ideas and some new ways to move forward on this for the security in the region, and for the Iran being the threat that we all must come around to deal with. The cooperation is critical, and I'm hopeful, and I believe as a seasoned analyst of this that we'll get there. It's just going to take a little bit more hard work.
Danny, thanks very much for joining us. We always appreciate it.
Thanks so much.